You're not welcome. Laura said she doesn't want you showing up. My family's message was ice cold after I paid for their whole wedding. Then cover it yourselves, parasites. I barked while canceling it all and erasing 55 files. Now handle your own bill. Can you believe it? I poured a staggering $25,000 into my own sister's wedding, her dream wedding, only to receive a chilling text message just 3 weeks before the big day. You're not invited. Laura doesn't want you there. My stomach actually dropped. The betrayal sliced deeper than any knife. Before I dive into this absolute roller coaster of a story, let me tell you a little about me. I'm Madison, 33, a software developer, and for as long as I can remember, I've been the responsible one in my family. Growing up in Portland, we weren't poor, but we definitely weren't living large. My parents worked tirelessly, but raising 2 girls meant cutting corners. Our house was modest, and luxury was never in our vocabulary. From childhood, the dynamic between Laura and me was crystal clear. I was the reliable one, the achiever, the daughter who just got things done. Laura, 2 years younger, was the family princess. While I was expected to excel, help out, and act like a mini-adult, Laura was allowed to find herself. Madison will figure it out became my parents' mantra for everything, from my part-time job taxes to college applications. Meanwhile, Laura got personalized guidance for everything from homework to prom dresses. Despite the imbalance, I thrived. I graduated valedictorian, snagged a full scholarship to the University of Washington for computer science. College was liberating. Finally, my hard work was recognized on its own merits. I graduated summa cum laude and landed a job at a hot tech startup in Seattle. Startup life was intense, but exhilarating. While my peers blew their big paychecks on fancy cars, I lived frugally, investing most of my salary and stock options. When our company was acquired 3 years later, my prudence paid off spectacularly. At 28, I suddenly had a net worth of over $2 million. Success didn't change my modest lifestyle much. I upgraded to a comfy 1-bedroom, took one incredible solo trip to Japan, and locked down solid retirement accounts. But what did change was my family's perception of me. Suddenly, I wasn't just reliable Madison. I was wealthy Madison, a walking, talking solution to everyone's financial problems. It started small. Dad needed a new car. I helped with the down payment. Mom's hospital cut her hours. I covered the mortgage for 3 months. Laura needed to move after a breakup. I paid her security deposit and months of rent. Each time, the gratitude felt sincere, if a little entitled. Then Laura met James. He came from old East Coast money, summer homes, country club memberships. Suddenly, Laura was jet-setting to the Hamptons, posting glamorous Instagram photos. The princess had found her prince, and my parents were ecstatic. The engagement came fast, just 8 months of dating. Laura called me, practically screaming about her 2-carat diamond and a perfect yacht proposal. I was genuinely happy for her, even with a nagging feeling that James seemed more impressed by her curated social media than her actual personality. Madison, I'm so excited for you to be part of this, she gushed. You've always been there for me, and I want you right by my side. When she mentioned the Griffin Estate, one of Seattle's most exclusive venues, a knot formed in my stomach. Griffin Estate weddings start at $50,000. Our parents couldn't afford that. Don't worry about Mom and Dad, Laura said, cutting me off. James's parents are helping, and we've got it covered. Then, the casual kicker. Though, if you wanted to help with some of the smaller expenses, that would be amazing. Of course, I replied, thinking she meant the rehearsal dinner or her dress. I had no idea some expenses would soon become the entire wedding, or that my generosity would ultimately get me uninvited from the very event I was funding. What started as some expenses quickly snowballed into a financial avalanche. 2 weeks later, Laura invited me to an upscale lunch, which, naturally, I paid for. She slid a wedding budget spreadsheet across the table. So this is what we're thinking, she chirped, pointing to the bottom line. $120,000. I nearly choked on my sparkling water. Laura, that's a lot, I managed. It's actually pretty reasonable for what we want, she countered, flipping through magazines filled with elaborate florals. The Griffin Estate alone is $25,000 just for the venue, but it's the only place that gives us the fairy tale vibe. I asked the obvious, what are James's parents contributing? Her smile faltered. Well, that's the thing. They're not exactly on board yet. They think we're rushing. She fidgeted. They might help later, but for now, we're on our own. And Mom and Dad are only putting in $10,000. That's all they can afford. Her eyes welled up. Madison, I know it's a lot, but this is my one special day. James is perfect, and I want everything to be perfect for him. His friends all had amazing weddings, and I can't show up with something basic. I should have said no. I should have suggested a reasonable budget. Instead, I heard myself say, I can cover the venue deposit while you figure out the rest. Laura's tears vanished, replaced by a dazzling smile. You're the best sister ever. I knew I could count on you. That $25,000 deposit for the venue, catering, and photography was just the beginning. Over the next few months, the requests kept coming, each presented as a crisis only I could solve. The florist needs a 50% deposit by Friday. The dress I fell in love with is being discontinued. The band James wanted just had a cancellation. Each time, I transferred the money, telling myself it was an investment in my sister's happiness. I created meticulous spreadsheets, naively believing they'd reimburse me. By 3 months before the wedding, I'd spent over $75,000, and the bills just kept coming. My parents, far from being a voice of reason, actively encouraged Laura's extravagance. "You're so blessed to be able to do this for your sister," my mother would say, implying it was my duty as the financially successful one. No one seemed to consider that I'd worked incredibly hard for my money, or that I might have my own plans for it. Laura's attitude, meanwhile, shifted from grateful to entitled with alarming speed. "Thank you so much for helping us," became, "We need another $5,000 for upgraded linens," without so much as a please. James, who supposedly came from money, was conspicuously absent from all financial discussions. One evening, after transferring another $3,000 for a premium open bar, I finally asked Laura directly about his contribution. "He's contributing in other ways," she snapped. "He's handling all the honeymoon arrangements." Later, I discovered through an accidental email that James's parents were paying for the honeymoon, a 2-week luxury resort stay in Bali. James wasn't contributing a dime. By the 2-month mark, I had spent nearly $95,000. My financial advisor had stopped subtle warnings and was now questioning my decisions directly. I'd had to liquidate investments, incurring tax penalties. But every time I considered pulling back, I imagined Laura's disappointment, the accusations of ruining her special day, the inevitable family drama. So I kept paying, buried my resentment, and told myself things would return to normal after the wedding. Little did I know normal, for my family meant taking advantage of my generosity until I had nothing left to give, emotionally or financially. Despite funding virtually the entire wedding, I found myself increasingly sidelined. My demanding job meant I couldn't attend every cake tasting, but I made efforts to join important decisions via FaceTime. Laura, however, seemed to deliberately schedule appointments when I was in unmovable meetings. "Oh, did I get the time wrong?" she'd say innocently. "We've already put down the deposit anyway, so it doesn't really matter." One Tuesday, I left work early to surprise Laura at a menu tasting. I found her with our mother and James's mother, Patricia, a thin, elegant woman with a perpetual expression of mild disapproval. "Madison," Laura exclaimed, looking more startled than pleased. "What are you doing here?" "My last meeting canceled," I explained, already sensing my mistake. "Thought I'd join." Patricia gave me a cool once-over. "Laura didn't mention you'd be joining us." "Last-minute decision," I said, extending my hand. "I'm Madison, Laura's sister." "Yes," Patricia replied, barely touching my fingers. "Laura's mentioned you work in computers, was it?" Before I could answer, Laura jumped in. "Madison's just super busy, so she usually can't make these things. Mom and I have been handling most of the details." Throughout the tasting, I was treated like an intruder. Patricia dominated, vetoing menu items as too pedestrian, suggesting expensive upgrades I knew would land on my credit card. Laura deferred to her future mother-in-law on everything, while our mother nodded along enthusiastically. After Patricia left, I pulled Laura aside. "What was that about?" I felt like I was crushing someone else's wedding planning. "Don't be dramatic," Laura sighed. "Patricia has amazing taste. I want her to feel included." "More included than the person paying for everything?" I couldn't help asking. Laura's face hardened. "Is that what this is about? The money? Are you going to hold that over my head forever?" Our mother intervened. "Girls, please. Madison, your sister is under a lot of stress. The last thing she needs is to feel guilty about accepting your help." I apologized, as I always did, and the moment passed. But the pattern continued. A week later, grabbing coffee near Laura's apartment, I overheard her voice from a corner table. She was with her maid of honor, Kimberly. "Madison's being such a control freak about everything," Laura complained, loud enough for me to hear every word. "Just because she's paying doesn't mean she gets to make all the decisions. It's my wedding, not hers." "That sucks," Kimberly sympathized. "But at least you're getting the dream wedding without going into debt. Small price to pay for her attitude, I guess." "Sometimes I wish she would just send the money and stay out of it," Laura sighed. "She's making everything so complicated with her spreadsheets and questions." I left before they could spot me, feeling like I'd been punched in the stomach. My spreadsheets and questions were my attempt to stay organized, a courtesy to her, not a control tactic. The final red flag waved 3 weeks before the wedding. Laura organized a bridal party spa day. I wasn't officially in the bridal party. Laura claimed she didn't want to burden me with extra responsibilities, but given how much I was doing, I assumed I'd be included in the celebration. I found out about the spa day from my cousin Rachel's Instagram story, a photo of Laura and 6 other women in plush robes, champagne flutes in hand, captioned "Spoiling our bride-to-be." Hashtag Laura and James tie the knot. When I confronted Laura that evening, she burst into tears. "I didn't think you'd want to come. You're always so busy and stressed about work. You were trying to be considerate by excluding me from a day celebrating your wedding? The wedding I'm paying for." My voice shook with hurt and anger. "I'm sorry," she sobbed. "I've been so overwhelmed. You're right, I should have invited you. I'll make it up to you. You're the most important person in this whole process, and I couldn't do any of this without you." Her apologies seemed sincere. For a few days, things improved. Laura called daily, asked my opinion, even scheduled a sisters-only dinner. I began to think I'd overreacted. Then came the rehearsal dinner. James's parents, after all their earlier hesitations, had finally agreed to cover this event, hosting it at an exclusive country club. Meeting James's extended family and friends was illuminating in all the wrong ways. His college roommates, all finance bros, made subtle digs about tech being overvalued. More concerning was how Laura presented herself. Gone was my slightly awkward, funny sister who'd once dreamed of teaching. In her place was a polished, name-dropping stranger who claimed to run her own successful lifestyle consulting business, a dramatic overstatement of an Instagram account where she occasionally posted sponsored content. When James's uncle asked how we'd managed to afford such an extravagant wedding on a teacher's salary, Laura smoothly replied, "Madison and I have been quite successful in our careers, as if we were equal contributors to the wedding fund." Later, I overheard Patricia telling another guest, "Laura comes from a good family. Her sister made some money in that tech bubble. Nothing like our family businesses, of course, but they're comfortable." I felt sick. Laura wasn't just taking credit for my money, she was minimizing my hard-earned success to fit into James's world. When I tried to talk to her about it, she dismissed my concerns. "I was just trying to fit in, Madison. James's family can be judgmental, and I didn't want them looking down on us by lying about your non-existent business and taking credit for my money." "Don't be so sensitive," she snapped. "It's not like I told them you're paying for everything. That would be humiliating for everyone." I went home that night with a growing sense of dread. Something felt deeply wrong, but I was in too deep. The wedding was less than a week away. All I had to do was get through the ceremony, smile for photos, and then I could set boundaries. Or so I thought. Then came the text message that changed everything. It arrived during a critical product meeting. As lead developer, I was presenting implementation timelines when my phone buzzed repeatedly. Normally, I'd never check, but the notification suggested an emergency. Excusing myself, I glanced at my screen and froze. 3 messages from my mother. "Madison, we need to talk about the wedding. There's been a change of plans. You're not invited. Laura doesn't want you there." I must have made some kind of sound, because colleagues looked up. Mumbling "family emergency," I fled to the nearest bathroom, locked myself in a stall, and read the rest with trembling hands. "Laura feels you've been too controlling about wedding plans. She says you're making everything about yourself and your contribution. James's parents have offered to help with some expenses, but only if the wedding proceeds without drama. The final blow, Laura needs this day to be perfect. Please understand and respect her wishes." Respect her wishes? After I'd poured nearly $100,000 into her perfect day? After months of entitlement, subtle insults, and exclusion? My vision blurred with tears of rage and humiliation. I called my mother immediately, struggling to keep my voice steady. "What exactly is going on?" "Madison," she sighed, as if I were being difficult. "I know this is upsetting, but Laura is under tremendous pressure. James's parents are finally warming up, and she can't risk anything going wrong." "And I'm something that could go wrong?" I asked, incredulous. There was a telling pause. "Patricia has expressed concerns about family tension overshadowing the ceremony. Apparently, Laura mentioned some disagreements between you two." "Disagreements?" I repeated. "You mean me occasionally asking questions about where my money is going?" "Honey, no one is denying your generosity," my mother said in that placating tone I'd grown to hate. "But this isn't about the money. It's about Laura's special day. Then explain to me exactly why I'm being uninvited to a wedding I'm paying for," I demanded. Another pause, longer this time. "James's parents spoke with Laura yesterday. They're willing to contribute $50,000, but they were concerned about what they called family dysfunction. Apparently, Laura told them you've been having episodes." "Episodes?" My blood ran cold. "What does that mean?" My mother's voice dropped to a whisper. She may have implied that you've been struggling with some mental health issues, that your success has come with a toll, and you've been taking it out on her." The bathroom stall seemed to spin around me. My sister hadn't just excluded me or taken advantage. She'd actively painted me as mentally unstable to justify cutting me out. "Did you defend me?" I asked, already knowing the answer. "Madison, try to understand. This wedding is everything to Laura. James comes from a very traditional family. They value stability and appearances. And what about honesty? What about basic human decency? Does Laura value those things at all? Of course she does, my mother insisted. She's just under a lot of pressure right now. Once the wedding is over, you two can work through this. A clarity I'd never experienced before washed over me. For years, I'd been the family fixer, the responsible one, the bank account with no boundaries. I told myself it was love, but in that moment, I recognized it for what it truly was, exploitation. Mom, I said with unnatural calm, please tell Laura that if I'm not welcome at the wedding, then neither is my money. Madison, don't be vindictive. I'm not being vindictive. I'm establishing a boundary that should have existed all along. My voice grew stronger with each word. If James's parents are contributing $50,000 with the condition that I'm not there, they can contribute the other $100,000. I've already spent $2. You can't do that. My mother gasped. Everything's paid for. The wedding is in 3 days. Actually, most vendors have policies about final payments and cancellations. I should know. I've read all the contracts. I paused, letting it sink in. Madison, please tell Laura she has a choice. Either I'm at the wedding as an honored guest who made her day possible, or she can scramble to replace the funding I'm about to withdraw. I ended the call and sat in that bathroom stall for several minutes, heart pounding, but my mind strangely clear. Then I returned to the conference room, apologized, and finished my presentation with mechanical precision. No one would have guessed that inside, I was simultaneously shattered and reborn. As soon as the meeting ended, I requested an emergency personal day for tomorrow and went straight home to execute the most difficult and necessary decision of my adult life. I'm not normally a vindictive person. I've always been the peacemaker, the one who forgives quickly. But some betrayals cut too deep for simple forgiveness, especially when the offending parties show no remorse. This wasn't about revenge. This was about self-respect and consequences. Once home, I spread all the wedding documentation across my dining table, contracts, receipts, email confirmations, payment schedules. Everything had been meticulously organized. I created 3 lists: vendors with final payments pending, services that could be canceled with partial refunds, and payments that were non-refundable. My phone buzzed with messages from my family, which I ignored. This required focus and precision. I started with the venue, the Griffin Estate. Their contract had a clause allowing for cancellation with a partial refund if done more than 72 hours before the event. I called the event coordinator, Susan, with whom I'd been working closely for months. Madison, getting excited for Saturday. Susan chirped. Actually, Susan, I need to discuss cancellation options. A long pause. Cancellation? Is everything okay? I took a deep breath. No, it's not. I've been funding this entire wedding for my sister, but I've just been informed that I'm not welcome to attend. Under the circumstances, I can no longer financially support the event. To her credit, Susan didn't pry. I understand this must be incredibly difficult. She explained my options: cancel entirely for a 25% refund, or transfer the reservation. Please cancel and process the refund, I said firmly. If my sister or her fiancé contact you about reinstating, they're welcome to do so under their own financial responsibility. Next came the caterer, the photographer, the florist, the rental company, the bartending service, and a dozen other vendors. Some conversations were brief and businesslike. Others were awkwardly sympathetic. Word apparently traveled fast in the wedding industry, because by my 5th call, vendors were already aware. I heard what happened, the photographer said quietly. For what it's worth, I think you're doing the right thing. No one should be treated that way by family. The DJ was even more direct. Man, that's cold. Your sister sounds like a piece of work. No offense. I offered no details, but it was clear most vendors had encountered similar situations. Several even offered more generous refund terms than their contract specified, citing unusual circumstances. By early evening, I'd processed cancellations for every service I'd booked and paid for. Where refunds were possible, I provided my banking details. Where money was lost, I accepted it as the price of my freedom from toxic family dynamics. The last step was digital. I logged into the wedding planning website I'd created and downloaded all documents for my records, then deleted the entire site. I removed the shared online folders containing vendor information, seating charts, timelines, and the 55 meticulously created planning files that had consumed countless hours of my time. Just as I finished, my phone rang. Laura. After sending all her calls to voicemail all day, I decided to answer this one. How could you do this to me? She screamed without preamble. The venue just called. Everything's been canceled. My wedding is in 3 days. Correction, I said calmly. The wedding you uninvited me from was in 3 days. Now it's your problem to solve. You vindictive bitch. Laura was sobbing. Now, you're ruining my life because of your jealousy. Mom was right. You are having a mental breakdown. Actually, I replied, I'm seeing things clearly for the first time. You and our parents have taken advantage of me for years. This was just the final straw. James's parents are going to think we're a family of lunatics. How am I supposed to explain this? You could try telling the truth for once. Tell them how you lied about my mental health to exclude me from the wedding I paid for. Tell them how you've been presenting yourself as a successful businesswoman while living off my generosity. I never asked you to pay for everything. You offered, I stated evenly, and you accepted enthusiastically and repeatedly. Then you excluded, belittled, and lied about me. I'm calling Mom, she threatened. Dad says we can sue for this. I couldn't help but laugh. Sue me for what? Canceling services I paid for? Good luck with that. This isn't over, Laura hissed before hanging up. She was right about that, but not in the way she meant. Within minutes, my parents called. I let it go to voicemail, then listened to my father's outraged message threatening legal action and my mother's tearful plea to reconsider. I sent a single text to our family group chat, then pay for it yourselves, leeches. I'm done being your ATM. Then I blocked all their numbers, poured myself a glass of wine, and began researching remote cabins for a week of solitude. I needed space to process what had happened and to begin the difficult journey of rebuilding my sense of self-worth without the familiar weight of family obligation. As I booked a peaceful lakeside cabin in the Olympic Peninsula, I felt simultaneously hollow and liberated. The family I thought I had was gone, or perhaps had never existed as I'd imagined. But for the first time in my adult life, I was putting myself first. And there was a certain power in that realization. The Olympic Peninsula in early autumn is a study in contradictions. Vibrant colors against gray skies, crashing waves alongside silent forests, endings and beginnings coexisting in perfect harmony. For 7 days, I walked deserted beaches, hiked ancient rainforests, and sat for hours watching eagles soar. My cabin had spotty cell service and no Wi-Fi, a blessing that forced me to disconnect not just from my family drama, but from the constant demands of the digital world. I'd left my work laptop at home, but brought a journal, filling pages with raw, unfiltered thoughts about my family, my patterns of people-pleasing, and a vision for my life moving forward. Clarity came more easily than I expected. By day 4, I understood that what hurt most wasn't the money, though nearly $100,000 was certainly significant. What cut deepest was the casual cruelty with which my sister and parents had dismissed my feelings while expecting unlimited access to my resources. The realization that I'd been valued primarily as a solution to problems, rather than as a person with needs of my own. On what would have been Laura's wedding day, I hiked to a remote waterfall and performed a small, private ritual of release. I wrote down every hurtful comment, every manipulative tactic, every moment of being taken for granted, then tore the pages into tiny pieces and scattered them into the rushing water. It was theatrical, perhaps, but watching those fragments disappear into the current felt powerfully symbolic. When I returned to Seattle, reality crashed back in waves. First, the social media fallout. Laura had posted a tear-streaked selfie on Instagram with a long caption about family betrayal and having to scramble to salvage our special day. Our mother shared a vague Facebook post asking for prayers during a difficult family time. Extended family and mutual friends chose sides without knowing the full story, many assuming I'd acted out of jealousy or mental instability, as Laura had suggested. I didn't dignify any of it with a response. The people who truly knew me reached out directly, offering support without judgment. My closest friend, Taylor, came over my first night back with takeout and wine, letting me vent for hours. My colleague, Jonathan, who'd witnessed my hasty exit from the product meeting, invited me to dinner with his husband, creating space for normal conversation that didn't revolve around my family drama. Through these friends, I learned bits and pieces about the wedding that did ultimately take place. Laura and James had indeed gotten married, but at his parents' country club rather than the Griffin estate. The guest list had been cut in half, elaborate floral arrangements replaced by simple centerpieces, the gourmet menu downgraded. Patricia had apparently stepped in with some additional funding, but nowhere near what I'd been providing. The whole thing felt rushed and tense, reported my cousin Rachel, who'd attended as a bridesmaid. Laura was snapping at everyone. James kept disappearing for important calls, and your parents looked like they wanted to be anywhere else. According to Rachel, my absence had been explained as a medical emergency vague enough to avoid questions, but specific enough to paint me as unstable. No mention was made of my financial contributions or the last-minute venue change. The narrative was completely controlled to portray Laura as the victim of unfortunate circumstances, rather than the architect of her own wedding disaster. 2 weeks after my return, my mother began reaching out again with guilt-laden texts, then increasingly desperate voicemails. I unblocked her number, but maintained my distance, responding only with brief acknowledgments that I was alive and well. My father, true to form, communicated through her rather than reaching out directly. "Your father and I think we all need to sit down as a family," she said in one message. Laura is back from her honeymoon, and there are things that need to be discussed. I replied with a single sentence. I'm not ready for that conversation yet. The truth was, I was deep in the process of examining our family dynamics with my newly found therapist, Dr. Chin. After just 3 sessions, patterns that had been invisible to me for years suddenly came into sharp focus. How Laura's role as the family princess had been established early and reinforced consistently. How my parents had outsourced their parental responsibilities to me while giving Laura endless chances. How my financial success had been weaponized against me as an obligation, rather than celebrated as an achievement. Families develop roles for each member, Dr. Chin explained. You were assigned the role of capable caretaker, while your sister was assigned the role of needing care. These roles served your parents' emotional needs in some way, which is why they've worked so hard to maintain them, despite how harmful they've been to you. As autumn deepened into winter, the holiday season loomed. For the first time in my adult life, I declined my parents' invitation for Thanksgiving, choosing instead to volunteer at a community dinner for tech industry newcomers. Christmas brought more pressure, with daily calls from my mother insisting that families should be together regardless of disagreements. I held firm, sending gifts but maintaining my physical and emotional distance. Instead of the traditional Russell family Christmas, I joined Taylor's family celebration, where I was treated with warmth and respect, without any undercurrents of obligation or resentment. The most surprising development came in January, when several extended family members reached out independently to share their own experiences with Laura's entitlement. My cousin Michael confessed that she'd borrowed $5,000 from him 2 years ago with vague promises of repayment that never materialized. Aunt Patricia, my father's sister, not James's mother, revealed that Laura had lived with her rent-free for 6 months after college, while claiming to my parents that she was paying market rate. I never said anything because I didn't want to cause family drama, Patricia admitted over coffee. But after seeing how they've treated you, I regret staying silent. There's a pattern here that goes beyond normal sibling rivalry. Learning that others had experienced similar treatment was both validating and heartbreaking. The family mythology of Laura as the fragile princess and me as the invulnerable achiever had affected more relationships than just ours. It had created ripples of dysfunction, silencing those who might have spoken up earlier out of the same conflict avoidance that had kept me paying wedding bills long after red flags started appearing. By spring, I had established a new normal. Weekly therapy sessions, a small but supportive circle of friends, limited contact with my parents, and no direct communication with Laura or James. I'd redirected my financial generosity toward causes that mattered to me, a coding scholarship for girls from low-income backgrounds, a monthly donation to the Rainforest Preservation Organization, whose land I'd found healing during my Olympic Peninsula retreat. Boundaries aren't punishments, Dr. Chin reminded me during a session where I expressed guilt about limiting contact with my parents. They're structures that allow relationships to exist in healthier ways. Your family can choose to respect those boundaries or not, but that choice is theirs, not yours. Slowly, painfully, I was learning that lesson, that I could only control my own actions, not others' responses to them. That my worth existed independently of what I could provide for others. That real love didn't come with invoices or conditions. 6 months after the wedding that wasn't, I was no longer drowning in anger or hurt. Instead, I was navigating the unfamiliar but liberating waters of self-respect, one boundary at a time. They say time heals all wounds, but that's not entirely true. Time provides distance, perspective, context. But healing requires active work, conscious choices. In the year following Laura's wedding, I discovered that healing isn't a destination, but a winding path with unexpected turns, occasional backsliding, and moments of breakthrough when you least expect them. A significant milestone came 8 months after the wedding debacle when I finally agreed to meet my mother for coffee. We chose a neutral location, a quiet cafe, and set a firm 1-hour limit. Dr. Chin had helped me prepare with role-playing exercises and boundary-setting language, but my stomach still churned with anxiety as I spotted my mother already seated by the window. She looked older, somehow more fragile. Part of me wanted to immediately slip back into caretaker mode, to smooth away her worry lines and assure her everything was fine. But that pattern was exactly what had led us here. "Thank you for meeting me," she began, hands wrapped tightly around her mug. "I've missed you so much." "I've missed aspects of our relationship, too," I replied carefully. But I needed this time apart. What followed was the most honest conversation we'd ever had. For the first time, my mother actually listened as I explained how the family dynamics had affected me, how Laura's wedding had merely been the breaking point of a lifelong pattern. "I always thought we were doing the right thing," she said, tears welling in her eyes. "Laura needed more support, and you were so capable, so independent. I never considered that we were burdening you or taking you for granted." "Intent doesn't erase impact, Mom," I replied, a phrase Dr. Chin had taught me. "You and Dad may not have intended to create this imbalance, but the effect was real. And when I finally tried to establish boundaries, the family narrative became that I was having a mental breakdown. My mother looked down, ashamed. Laura was so afraid of losing James. His family is very image conscious, and she thought if there was any hint of family conflict, so she lied about me. And you and Dad supported that lie. We didn't know how to navigate it, she admitted. Everything was happening so fast, and Laura was so distraught. We made the wrong choice, and I'm truly sorry for that. It wasn't a perfect apology. There were still hints of justification, but it was more acknowledgement than I'd ever received before. We agreed to continue meeting occasionally, with the understanding that certain topics remained off-limits and that my relationship with Laura would develop on its own timeline, if at all. My father proved more resistant to change. When we eventually met for lunch, his approach was to act as if nothing significant had happened. Your mother says you're doing well at work, he began, bypassing any mention of the past year of estrangement. When I gently but firmly steered the conversation toward the necessary topics, he grew defensive. Families have disagreements all the time, Madison. At some point, you need to let this go and move forward. Moving forward requires acknowledgement of what happened, I countered. This wasn't a simple disagreement. This was a pattern of behavior that culminated in me being labeled mentally unstable and excluded from an event I paid for. He shifted uncomfortably. Laura was under tremendous pressure. We all were, I interrupted. The difference is how we chose to handle that pressure. Our relationship remains strained but civil. I accepted that my father might never fully understand my perspective or acknowledge his role in the family dynamics. That acceptance, painful as it was, represented its own form of growth, recognizing that I couldn't change others, only how I responded to them. As for Laura and James, their perfect fairy tale showed cracks almost immediately. Through the family grapevine, I learned they'd separated briefly just 4 months after the wedding. James had apparently expected Laura to integrate seamlessly into his upper-class world, while Laura had expected marriage to bring financial security without the need for actual work. Neither expectation had been met. They reconciled after a month apart, but rumors of tension persisted. James's family had not embraced Laura as she'd hoped, and the lifestyle she'd anticipated, charity galas and summer homes, came with social expectations and obligations she wasn't prepared for. I took no pleasure in their struggles. Despite everything, Laura was still my sister, and some part of me would always care about her well-being. But I also recognized that their relationship problems weren't my responsibility to fix, a realization that would have been impossible for me to reach a year earlier. Then, 11 months after the wedding, a letter arrived at my condo. I recognized Laura's handwriting immediately on the pale blue envelope. For several minutes, I just held it, unsure whether opening it would be an act of self-care or self-sabotage. Finally, curiosity won out. Inside was a card with a simple message. I owe you an apology. Can we talk? No excuses, no blame shifting, no emotional manipulation, just a straightforward acknowledgement and request. After consulting with Dr. Chin, I responded with equal simplicity. I'm open to that. Coffee next Tuesday at 3. The Laura who met me at the cafe bore little resemblance to the entitled bride who had thrown me out of her wedding. Her designer clothes had been replaced by simple jeans and a sweater. Her carefully highlighted hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail. Even her makeup was subdued, revealing freckles I hadn't seen since we were teenagers. James and I are separating, she said after we'd ordered. For real, this time. The divorce papers are being drafted. I'm sorry to hear that, I replied, and meant it. Don't be. It's the right decision. She took a deep breath. Being married to James made me see myself through his family's eyes, and I didn't like what I saw. Shallow, materialistic, willing to hurt people who love me to maintain appearances. That's a painful realization. It is, but necessary. She met my eyes directly. Madison, what I did to you is unforgivable. The wedding, the lies about your mental health, taking advantage of your generosity for years, all of it. I wouldn't blame you if you never wanted to speak to me again. Then why are we having coffee? I asked gently. Because I need to take responsibility for my actions. No excuses. Her hands trembled slightly. I was so focused on creating the perfect image that I destroyed the most important relationship in my life. I don't expect forgiveness or reconciliation. I just need you to know that I recognize what I did. I deeply regret it, and I'm working to become someone who would never treat anyone that way again. The conversation that followed was raw, honest, and occasionally tearful. Laura spoke of her therapy journey, her realization that she'd been playing the role of princess for so long she'd lost sight of her authentic self. How James's world had initially seemed like the perfect extension of that role, until the constant judgment and performance became suffocating. I'm starting over, she explained. Moving back to Portland, getting a teaching credential like I originally wanted before I got caught up in trying to be Instagram famous. Building a life based on what actually matters to me, not what impresses others. I didn't promise immediate reconciliation or a return to our former relationship. Too much had happened for such a simple resolution. But I did offer what felt authentic in the moment. I appreciate your apology, and I'm open to slowly rebuilding some form of relationship if your actions consistently match your words. That coffee meeting didn't magically heal all wounds or instantly restore our sisterhood, but it planted a seed of possibility that has slowly, cautiously grown in the months since. We text occasionally now, sharing small moments rather than grand declarations. I sent her information about the teaching program I'd researched. She sent me a funny meme that reminded her of our childhood. As for me, the experience of being the uninvited sister transformed my approach to relationships of all kinds. I became more discerning about where I invested my time, energy, and yes, money. I developed a healthy skepticism toward those who approached me with immediate needs but no interest in my well-being. Most importantly, I learned that walking away from toxic dynamics isn't selfish. It's often the most loving choice you can make, both for yourself and for those who need to face the consequences of their actions. 6 months ago, I began dating someone, a kind, thoughtful software engineer named Brian, who appreciates my generosity without exploiting it. When I cautiously shared my family history, his response was anger on my behalf, rather than judgment of my boundaries. "They're lucky you're even considering letting them back into your life," he said, squeezing my hand. That simple validation meant everything. Confirmation that my experience was as egregious as I'd felt it to be, not an overreaction, as my family had initially framed it. The money I lost on Laura's wedding is long gone, and I've made peace with that. The emotional toll lasted longer, but the personal growth that emerged from that painful period has been invaluable. I've discovered strength I never knew I had, boundaries I never thought I deserved to set, and a version of myself that no longer needs external validation to feel worthy. If you're watching this and recognizing similar patterns in your own family dynamics, please know that you're not alone. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself and others is to step back and let natural consequences unfold. Setting boundaries isn't selfish. It's necessary for authentic relationships to flourish. Have you ever had to set difficult boundaries with family members? What helped you through that process? Share your experiences in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please like and subscribe for more content about navigating complex family relationships and personal growth. Thank you for listening to my journey from doormat to dignity. I'm grateful for each of you who took the time to hear my story.